Imagine sitting on the edge of your bed, staring blankly at the wall, completely paralyzed by a profound, suffocating inertia. You are fully aware of exactly what you need to do, the deadline is rapidly approaching, the stakes are undeniably high, yet you feel physically incapable of forcing your body into motion. Society often hastily labels this state as a moral failing, a lack of discipline, or simple laziness. However, from a strict neurobiological perspective, you are not lazy, you are experiencing a temporary neurological gridlock, a fascinating and highly specific chemical failure within the deepest primitive structures of your human brain. Motivation is not a mystical aura, a personality trait, or a sudden burst of divine inspiration that strikes the chosen few. It is a highly mechanistic, heavily regulated neurochemical process, primarily governed by a microscopic molecule that dictates almost every deliberate action you take. Understanding the cold, mechanical reality of how this system operates is the absolute prerequisite for escaping the trap of chronic procrastination and finally taking control of your daily actions. For decades, popular psychology has fundamentally misunderstood the role of dopamine, incorrectly labeling it as the brain's primary reward chemical, the substance released only when you finally achieve a goal or experience pleasure. Modern neuroscience has completely dismantled this theory, revealing a truth far more complex and actionable. Dopamine is not the molecule of reward, it is the molecule of anticipation, craving, and forward momentum. It is the chemical that compels an animal to forage for food, the drive that pushes a human to seek out shelter, and the neurological fuel required to overcome the friction of starting a difficult task. When your brain anticipates a positive outcome or a potential reward, it releases a spike of dopamine that essentially narrows your visual and psychological focus, physically propelling you toward that objective. This mechanism is known as reward prediction error. If the perceived effort required to complete a task vastly outweighs the anticipated neurochemical reward, your brain actively suppresses dopamine production, slamming the brakes on your motor circuits and leaving you stranded in that state of paralyzed inertia on the edge of your bed. The single most destructive psychological myth surrounding human productivity is the pervasive belief that you must somehow feel motivated before you can begin taking action. This perfectly backward assumption keeps millions of people trapped in an endless cycle of passive waiting, desperately searching for external inspiration, reading self-help books, or consuming motivational media in a futile attempt to artificially inflate their dopamine levels. The cold biological reality is that action does not follow motivation. Motivation almost always follows action. This is the core principle behind the psychological treatment protocol known as behavioral activation. When you force yourself to engage in a behavior, even an incredibly microscopic one, your brain registers the completion of that tiny action and releases a fractional dose of dopamine. This minor neurochemical hit slightly lowers the threshold of resistance for the next step, creating a localized momentum. By the time you have forced yourself through the first 5 minutes of a grueling workout or the first paragraph of a complex report, your brain has naturally generated the precise chemical state you were hopelessly waiting for before you started. To effectively hijack this system, you must master the art of dismantling your goals into terrifyingly small, entirely non-threatening components. When you look at a massive project, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, registers the immense cognitive load required, instantly triggering an avoidance response to conserve bodily resources. You cannot simply overpower this ancient survival mechanism with sheer willpower. Instead, you must bypass the threat detection system by lowering the initial barrier to entry so drastically that failure becomes mathematically impossible. If your goal is to run 5 miles, your only actual objective is to put on your running shoes. If your goal is to write a comprehensive business proposal, your only objective is to open the document and write a single sentence. This strategy leverages the Zeigarnik effect, a psychological phenomenon demonstrating that the human brain intensely dislikes uncompleted tasks. Once a task is initiated, no matter how artificially small that initiation might be, your cognitive architecture creates an internal tension that constantly nudges you toward completion, smoothly transitioning you from forced discipline into a state of natural, frictionless flow. Furthermore, attempting to force motivation entirely through internal psychological exertion is a biologically expensive and highly exhaustible strategy. The prefrontal cortex, the region of your brain responsible for executive function, long-term planning, and overriding primitive impulses, consumes a massive amount of metabolic energy. Every single time you rely on raw willpower to resist a distraction or force an action, you actively drain this limited cognitive battery, a phenomenon heavily documented in the scientific literature as ego depletion. The most consistently motivated and highly productive individuals in the world rarely possess superhuman reservoirs of willpower. Instead, they are master architects of their physical and digital environments. They completely understand that human behavior naturally flows down the path of absolute least resistance. Therefore, the ultimate secret to sustainable motivation is manipulating environmental friction to serve your long-term goals. This environmental manipulation requires a ruthless physical restructuring of your daily surroundings. If you want to naturally motivate yourself to consume healthier food, relying on sheer discipline while keeping a pantry full of processed sugar is a guaranteed formula for neurological failure. You must remove the negative stimuli from your physical proximity, artificially increasing the friction required to execute a bad habit until it becomes exhausting. Conversely, you must drastically reduce the friction required to execute a positive habit. If you want to exercise in the morning, your athletic clothing must be laid out beside your bed, your water bottle filled, and your route planned the night before. By systematically removing every single micro-decision and physical obstacle standing between your current state and your desired action, you completely bypass the exhausted prefrontal cortex. You transform the desired behavior from a monumental struggle into an inevitable, thoughtless sequence of automated actions. True motivation is ultimately the mathematical elimination of all other alternatives. Please be strictly advised that the neurological, psychological, and behavioral information discussed today is provided exclusively for educational and informational purposes. It is absolutely not intended to serve as professional medical advice, psychiatric diagnosis, or formal clinical treatment regarding chronic depression, severe executive dysfunction, or any underlying mental health conditions that severely impact daily motivation. Chronic lethargy and an absolute inability to initiate action can often be primary symptoms of complex neurochemical imbalances, thyroid dysfunction, or severe clinical depression that simply cannot be resolved through behavioral adjustments alone. If you are experiencing persistent, debilitating apathy, chronic fatigue, or extreme emotional distress, you must immediately seek the professional guidance of a licensed psychiatrist, clinical psychologist, or specialized healthcare provider to formally evaluate and treat your specific biological needs. Thank you for taking this profound journey into the underlying neurobiology of human drive and behavioral activation with us today on the Health Channel. If dismantling the myths of laziness and learning how to mechanically hijack your dopamine system to finally take control of your actions brought massive value to your life, please hit the like button right now to support our scientific community. What is the single biggest obstacle that consistently destroys your motivation, and what incredibly small micro-step are you going to take today to instantly break that cycle? Share your unique struggles and environmental strategies in the comments section below so we can build a massive library of actionable knowledge together. Make sure to subscribe to the channel right now and click the notification bell so you never miss our deep explorations into human psychology, cognitive optimization, and healthy living. Until next time, stop waiting for the spark, take the first step, and stay vigilant.